Is nothing ever big enough for you? Do you want to play a character that feels the same way? Well, good. You're in luck, because behind today's secret door, the Fighter Rune Knight Test Drive Part 2. And it's going to be big. So behind today's Secret Door, the Fighter Rune Knight Test Drive Part 2. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons & Dragons. My name is Matt Morich. All right, so I think we're going to do levels 9 through 20, which will complete the test drive. But I thought first we should talk about magic items. And when we talk about magic items, I'm not going to go over obvious ones. I mean, some of them I think are painfully obvious, but I think they're still worth noting. But things like legendary items that are just going to be, of course, you're going to want a legendary magic item. So there won't be legendaries listed here, but they're very rare and down, and I'm focusing mostly on rares and down. So with that in mind, let's get to magic items. So the first magic item that I think it's so obvious, but it really needs to be discussed, is a magic weapon. Now, as I go through the test drive, I can't assume that you're going to have a magic item or a magic weapon, but let's face it, you'd have to be playing a pretty strict low-level magic world for your DM to not give martial characters magic weapons. I can't think of a time that that's ever happened, and I've played on a lot of low magic campaigns. You might even find them relatively early in your career. You might find them at level 3 or 4, at least like a +1 weapon. And it's to this point that I want to address the question of Great Weapon Master. And if we do take it, but as I've stated before, we take it at level 14. I am a firm believer in having a maxed out attack or maxed out strength of 20 before you take Great Weapon Master, assuming that you are not playing with the flanking rules or have some other way of generating consistent advantage for all of your attacks. Then maybe you can get away with the 18, but even then it's not great. You really want to be hitting at the height of the curve because that -5 is so devastating. Even advantage only, in most cases, will mitigate that -5. So a +1 weapon, if you got a +1 weapon, and if you are 1 behind, let's say we're talking about level 4, you should have an 18 strength at level 4. That's how we did it in the build. You would have a 16 at that point, and you'd take the ASI to make it 18. If you already had a +1 weapon, you might be able to get away with going ahead and taking Great Weapon Master at level 4. And I say this because with the Fire Rune, you're going to have lots of situations where you're going to have advantage. And as we saw in the last video, you're going to be able to apply advantage. I wouldn't use the Storm Rune for a weapon roll unless there was nothing else to use it for. So a +1, maybe. If you got a +2, that's where now you're hitting ahead of the curve, even if you're 1 behind. So let's say at level 8, you got a +2 weapon, and you had to make the decision of whether to improve your strength or take Great Weapon Master. If I had a +2 weapon, I would probably go ahead and take Great Weapon Master there. There's situations where you don't even need advantage. The armor class is significantly lower, where it will start generating significant amount of damage for you. And level 14 is awfully late, but this character doesn't need Great Weapon Master like some other fighter types do. It's concerned with having control of the battlefield. But if you can squeeze Great Weapon Master in there, I mean, damage is damage. So I would look at the +1 or +2 weapons as a way of accessing Great Weapon Master more quickly. Or if you just took it at level 1 instead of taking Heavy Armor Master, as I did in the build, then just look at it. If you've already got Great Weapon Master, just go, yay, I'm going to hit more with a +1 or +2 weapon. Otherwise, obviously, weapons like a Flame Tongue is probably an optimal choice, especially for damage. That will actually do more damage on average than Great Weapon Master will anyway. So if you had a Greatsword and you got a Flame Tongue and you had Great Weapon Master, you're still going to be hitting behind the curve a little bit, but that's just an awful lot of damage being thrown in there. But be mindful, that -5 is a killer. It doesn't hurt the archer so much because they've got the +2 from the archery fighting style. So moving along, now this one is a very big item, and it's kind of a no-brainer also, a Belt of Giant Strength. But for goodness sakes, if anybody should get a Belt of Giant Strength, it's you, right? You're a Rune Knight. All of your power comes from giants. If you found a Belt of Giant Strength, and I'm talking about a reasonably good one, I'm not talking again about the legendary ones, but like if you found like a Fire or Frost Giant Strength belt, and you didn't get the belt, I'd pout. I think I might just pout, because that's kind of a dream magic item for this character subclass. It's thematic, and of course, it's going to help any martial class that's using strength-based attacks. And you have a very, very, very high-level claim to this. There are things, though, depending on what's been coming up in Treasure, that we'll get to later, that I think trump it. But it's still one I'd want to have. So obviously, Belt of Giant Strength, amazing. Armor of Resistance for the Rune Knight is an interesting pick. So you don't get to pick, and you would want this only for something like, say, fire. You have to pick one damage type. Take fire, you're already resisting bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing. If you can add fire on top of that, or poison, but you're getting poison from the Hill Giant as well. So you've got all the physical damage, poison, and now you could get fire. That's a lot. That's a lot of very common damage types. So much more valuable for you than it might be for another martial character where it's like, oh, gee whiz, damage resistance of one type is always good, but for you, you're just whittling away at all the things that can really do damage to you. And with that +3, if you took Heavy Armor Master, you're very, 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 very hard to kill. So I think Armor of Resistance is a good choice. And for the archer character, obviously, you're going to want, obviously magic bows apply to the magic weapons, as I said before. And if you found an oath bow, well, goody, yippee. But aside from those, for the archer, I would strongly, bracers of archery, they're not a high-level item, so you have a reasonably good chance of finding them. And again, you're already doing good damage as the archer because you've got sharpshooter at level 1. Adding a little bit more on top, that's always good. And then next, I would really, I don't like these per se, but they are very useful for a window of time. The Ion Stone, the Fortitude Ion Stone, would give you a +2 to your Constitution to a maximum of 20. Now, when you've got your 18 Constitution, this could also work in the same way that a +1 weapon could work for hitting, for strength. So instead of doing the stat bump to 20, you could sit on that stat bump at the ASI and go ahead and take Great Weapon Master at that point. So you've got multiple opportunities where you might be able to consider doing that because it's filling in that role for you. Or you could just make it a very short-term item that you have for a little while and then trade it to another party member or sell it or what have you. It's got its uses. So the Strength Ion Stone, same deal as the Fortitude Ion Stone. You'd use it for the exact same purposes and ways you could rearrange how you take your ASIs should you find one. And then we get to the ones where I think these are tied or beat out the Belt of Giant Strength, which personally, a Belt of Giant Strength is one of my favorite magic items for martial characters in D&D. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. But the manuals, the Manual of Bodily Health and the Manual of Gainful Exercise and the Manual for the Archers, all of these are amazing. Okay, they're very rare, but they don't require attunement per se. So you just have to study for, I believe it's 24 hours with them, and then the magic is lost. But those increase their relative stat by 2 and the maximum by 2. But if I could only have one, I would take Bodily Health. It's going to affect my DCs. If I can get a 22 and bump up my DCs to that level, two of your key abilities are big. You need them to fail those saves. And if you can hit them with disadvantage, now that you've got the Storm Giant rune to apply disadvantage, you're just making it that much harder. Now you might be able to have a shot at something that is actually very strong or very wise, depending on which ability we're talking about here. So yeah, the manuals, all of them, all the physical ones, you want those badly, really badly. And so these last few items, they're not really wow items. The big wow items, the legendary ones, you know you're going to want those. I'm just looking for some of the ones that affect your character in ways that you might not have been looking at otherwise. The first is the Scimitar of Speed. Now, as I talked about, if you don't have Great Weapon Master, when you find a magic item like this, your character is very flexible. The Scimitar of Speed gives you a bonus action attack every round. Okay. Well, as I talked about the problem with Polearm Master, or even dual wielding for that matter, about half of your bonus actions are sucked up by your rune, the Hill Giant rune, and the Giant's Might feature. That's probably half of your turns in combat are going to be sucked up. Is it worth taking a feat where you're only going to use it half the time? Well, the Scimitar of Speed, that's its magical property. So it allows you're not losing anything really. You're still gaining 2 attacks that you wouldn't gain otherwise. So it may be that may be better than you might think otherwise. So then we get to the Amulet of Health. This is very similar to the Ion Stone of Fortitude, but it's only going to get you to a 19. But if you found it right away, if you found one when you had a 16 con, that can get you to that 19 constitution right away. So it's useful till probably level 6. So if you find one, take it. Another party member will definitely want it. So, I mean, there's going to be plenty of party members that are going to want it. So either trade or sell or whatever, however you want to work that out, that's entirely up to you. Magic item negotiations are crazy. So that's magic items. And let's get on to levels 9 through 20. Okay, level 9. From the fighter feature, we get Indomitable. Now, Indomitable allows you to re-roll a failed save. This makes this. I'm not saying this is a game breaker. It's not. But in the case of the Rune Knight, boy, is this frustrating for a DM. Think about what you're able to do when you got Runic Shield. You're able to. Someone fails a saving throw, or someone's hit. You can apply advantage, disadvantage. You're able to do so many things now that nothing is going to be getting through. And now, when you fail a saving throw, you can re-roll it. This applies to death saving throws too, by the way, for yourself with Indomitable. Death throw is a saving throw. So if you fail that death save, you're going to have to decide if Indomitable is worth it. Obviously, if it's the third one, and obviously is. But you might want to use it on the first one. I don't know. It depends on what the combat situation is. If you've been dropped and you're at 0, if you have reason to believe that someone's going to hit you in the next turn, that's another automatic death save failure. So you might not be able to afford to fail even one roll. So very circumstantial. And again, I wouldn't think that your Indomitable is probably going to be available to you to make a death save, because probably what's killing you is a failed save, which means you've probably already used it earlier. But this character is already very frustrating for the Dungeon Master. Now it's just a little bit more frustrating. And now we get to level 10. Level 10, we get Giant's Might. Does 2 things for us now. We grow 3d4 inches permanently. We don't get anything for it. It's just a ribbon ability. But our Giant's Might, the damage that we do from Giant's Might, is now a d8 instead of a d6. So, okay, an extra point of damage around. Cool with that. Nothing super big, though. But through the regular Rune Knight, at level 10, we get an additional rune. So we've been running with Fire, with Hill, and with Storm. And now with our 4th rune, of course, we're going to take back Stone, which is such a great shutdown ability. It was a real shame to lose it even for 3 levels, but now we get it back. And that's just another thing that we can use. So your actions, everything is accounted for. All of your reactions are so accounted for. It's insane. So a very, very powerful level. Now, with the Stone Giant coming back into the fold, we also have to consider the role-playing aspects of that again. So however you were playing, how the Stone Giant rune was affecting you, if you're doing that, this is not a rule. This is just a role-playing idea that I have. But if we're doing that, then consider now how quickly that's going to start affecting you again, maybe very rapidly, because it's already affected you in the past. And now you get to play with that delicious bit of the dream. Everything outside your home is a dream. Okay, level 11. I don't need to explain level 11 very much, I don't think. We get 3 attacks. So our average damage now with a greatsword would be 33 around when you figure in what you'll be getting throughout the day on Action Surge. That's without advantage. When you figure in attacks with advantage, like the round that you're doing advantage attacks on, it jumps to 45. That's how big of a difference when you have advantage on all attacks can make. And that's what the Fire Rune will do if you can manage to lock them down with that restrained condition. So just crazy. All right, level 12, we get another ASI, and we're putting our ASI into Con for the melee and to Dex for the archer. So both will now be 20s. Our DC in both cases will now be 17, which is quite good. So, well, obviously it's the best you can get. So also, I think it should be one of the things I like to do when I'm going through this is I like to compare where I am in relation to other martial classes. So consider comparing the melee, this melee test drive to a barbarian who took Polearm Master and Great Weapon Master. You are going to have, on average, as the melee Rune Knight, with that 20 con, your average, if you're just rolling on average or just taking average with first level max, you have 130 hit points. The Barbarian has, even though they have a higher hit die, they only have 107. And I say that because it's very unlikely, next to impossible, for the Barbarian to have a 20 constitution unless they found one of the magic items that I was talking about before. It's likely that they have a 14. They might have a 16. They might, but that's not a 20. So, they might have a couple more points better than 107, but not by much. Your damage is not going to be quite as good, but it's not as far back as you would think. And remember, I assume 3 combats a day. You can activate your Hill Giant rune probably twice a day. So you're fighting with damage resistance. You have better armor than the Barbarian. You have better hit points than the Barbarian, and you're taking 3 off the top of any bludgeoning, slashing, or piercing damage. And that can be applied after damage resistance has been applied. You also, in 2 of those combats, have damage resistance to poison. The Barbarian, on the other hand, not only do they have weaker armor, but it's highly likely that they're going to be using reckless attack, which means that all attacks against them have advantage. So they're getting hit way more. And even though you have all that damage resistance, you're just getting hit left and right as a Barbarian. So those hit points, even though you've got the damage resistance there, you have more hit points and you have all that. So defensively, you're just in a way better place. Your damage is not as good as the Barbarian, but the Barbarian can't control the battlefield the way you can either. So, yeah, if you could do comparable damage to the Barbarian, then why play a Barbarian ever? The Rune Knight can do it all. And you can kind of sort of do it all. You can come close. Not suggesting that you actually can pull off things, especially if you start talking about multi-classing. Damages can get crazy. But just doing straight class stuff, looking at what one class can do versus another, once you get Great Weapon Master, maybe you've already got it, and you're going to have rounds with advantage, you'll be close. You just won't be able to do it all the time the way the Barbarian can. So 15th level. This is huge. It's crazy. It's insane. Okay, we get our 5th rune. That's big, but that's actually not the half of it. So we'll take the Cloud Giant rune and say thank you very much. It was hard not taking Cloud, but I felt that Stone was better. I thought Fire was better. So we've always gone with those. But now we have Cloud. And we can use all of our runes twice before needing a short or a long rest. That means that we have 20 uses of runes in a day. That's 4 attacks that were hits that are going to be turned into attacks against the enemy itself by the Cloud. That's 4 stone banishments. That's 8 of your 12 reactions accounted for right there. The other 4 are easily going to be sucked up with Storm Giant. In fact, you might have to use them. You may have to prioritize the Storm Giant reactions over those, but you get the point. If you are using a lot of Storm Giant reactions, the rest will all see regular use through the others. So your reactions are so accounted for. It's actually very challenging. This is harder now than ever before of determining. Remember, your turn is never over as the Rune Knight. And now your choices, because you've got more and more choices, it can be crippling to decide, should I waste the reaction? Because what if this happens? And my best answer for you is what's happening now bad enough? Is what you're fearing could happen, is it a given that it could happen? If it's a given and it's worse, then you may have to wait for it. But if what's happening now is bad enough and the other is possible, I would go with this is bad enough and use my reaction. I think you could end up not using your reaction or using it for a less valuable thing. And that's the challenging thing about playing a Rune Knight. If you've ever played Magic the Gathering, it's the dilemma of playing blue or playing against somebody that plays blue, quite honestly, because they're going to have counterspell in not D&D's counterspell. They're going to have a way of negating the effect. And you never know if the blue player is holding it. And if the blue player is holding a counterspell, they don't know if they should counter that or should they save it. So it's a very tricky, it's a lot of fun though. You really have to be suited for it. So whatever the case, as I said in the previous video, as long as you use your powers, it's not a mistake. And make sure, for goodness sakes, if you have to get up and leave the table to go use the restroom, take a phone call or make a phone call or whatever, go get a snack, make sure that you tell the DM that this guy's next attack on whoever's up on the initiative order, I'm giving disadvantage to it. That's not a very good use of the reaction, but it's better than no use at all. So just think about it that way. You don't always have to have it to the best possible use as long as it's getting used, but it's going to be tricky. So in this last series of levels, we'll go very quickly. There's all the big heavy lifting has now been done. So level 16, we get an ASI. And these are all the hard work has been done. The melee character now can take lucky. And just as the archer character took it at 14th, now your character is just insane. Just crazy insane. Lucky on top of everything else you can do is nuts. For the archer, totally dealer's choice. If you want a feat that's kind of a luxury pick for you, I mean, there's a ton of good choices. You almost couldn't pick bad. At the worst, I would say maybe shoring up another saving throw. Not that you need to worry about saving throws too much, but you never know. You don't want to have to blow one of your resources to make a failed save if you can just improve your chances of making that save. So, maybe bumping your wisdom. Or if you have an odd number on wisdom, get the resilient feat so that you now have proficiency in that and you've got the bonus from resilient. So anything like that, just small increases that'll help shore up weaknesses in your character. 17th level, and we get now 2 uses of action surge, which is great. So you're going to be action surging quite a bit now. So if you get a short rest, that means you'll have 4 rounds out of 3 combats where you're going to be able to action surge. That's going to, with all those attacks, that's a dramatic increase in damage. And then we get Indomitable 3 times a day. It just gets worse. The amount of re-rolling at this point is nuts. I can only imagine what that would be like. How much time gets spent with this character forcing re-rolls? How much time? Ugh. So 18th level, our Giant Smite, now the die of damage we do increases to a D10. So again, that's another point of damage around. That's nice. But more importantly, when we grow, we're huge. I mean, literally, we're a huge creature. Huge creatures are 3 by 3. So you occupy 9 squares. You also have a reach of 5 feet now. This means that you can attack 40 different squares without a reach weapon. I didn't even calculate what that would be with a reach weapon. It would be crazy. So 40 squares you attack and you occupy 9. Wow. Okay, level 19, we get our ASI, and I'm not going to pretend that there's anything to say here. As I said in the previous ASI, shore up a weakness, or if there's something you wanted to do for role-playing, for a feat, or whatever. I mean, you're so powerful at this point, just take whatever pleases you. And level 20, your capstone. I think it's much ballyhooed. People talk about, 4 attacks. You get 4 attacks. Yeah, but it's level 20. Why does the warlock get 4 bolts at 17 and the fighter doesn't get to attack? They scaled exactly the same up until that point. I've always thought it was odd. But 4 attacks is nevertheless, it's great. but you're just not going to be able to enjoy it for very long, because once you've hit level 20, the campaign is, you've probably got, I don't know, 3 sessions, and that might be generous. So yeah, 4 attacks. It's cool. I mean, I don't want to downplay these last few levels. There's nothing mechanically important. I've already gone over the challenge of the class. So that's it. That's your Rune Knight. I hope you've found this useful, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy it, please like, share, subscribe. Remember, if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast bless on all of you.